in Wilmington. It's my first time here, so thanks for being so welcoming. My name's Ross Connelly. I'm the Northeast Regional Director for Americans for Prosperity and Americans for Prosperity Foundation, who's sponsoring this event. I have Rachelle here with me, who's our Senior Policy Analyst on Foundational Education. And we've been working on education freedom bills across the country for the past many years now, trying to really address a lot of the concerns that have been expressed here today. But since I know a lot of you folks probably aren't familiar with AFP and AFP Foundation, we're the nation's largest grassroots organization. We have 36 state chapters where we have permanent infrastructure, full-time staff, and now we are expanding to a 50-state strategy, of which Delaware is a piece. So I cover Maryland all the way up to Maine, and we are, I give this message to a lot of folks that I am not from the government, but I'm here to help. So that's basically AFP is really removing barriers that are standing in the way of Americans realizing their full potential. So we're just going to have a little back and forth just about what we at AFP Foundation view as our vision. Where are we heading in education? What do we want education to look like 10, 20 years down the road, and how are we going to get there? So I'll start off, since a lot of the other great panelists were really addressing a lot of the big issues here. So I want to start off just by asking Rachelle, what are the biggest issues with the education system as it's currently structured in your mind?
Yeah, well, it's great to be with you guys tonight. I want to make this a little interactive. I know you've been listening to several of us. But raise your hand if you think that the public education system is failing. You're all wrong. And I say that because the public education system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. So the public education system was created many, many decades ago, but it was the onset of the public education system as we know it today really bloomed in the Industrial Revolution. And the goal was to create factory workers. And it's interesting because a lot of the things that were implemented in factories were implemented in the education system. So you had students going class to class to class, moving at the sound of a bell, completing assignments, doing what someone told them to do, and then that was that. Are we still in the Industrial Revolution?
No.
No, thankfully. But our education system really hasn't changed. I mean, yeah, the schools are nicer, they're fancier, there may be iPads instead of textbooks, but for the most part, kids are still moving through a system from 8 to 5, moving at the sound of a bell every single hour. And if you look at every other part of our economy and society, everything is customizable except education, and particularly K-12. You can make the same for higher education, the same argument, but it's a little different. So I would say the biggest issue is we have a system that's outdated, that's not learner focused. You know, every kid is different. I'm sure that many of you in the room who have kids can say that if you have multiple kids, one kid is very different from the other. But we have a system that is designed to be one size fits all, but people are not one size fits all.
Yeah, I always like to say, even going back to the 1960s when we established the Department of Education, their original tasks, it was like 4. It is now dozens and dozens of what we're asking teachers in schools to be experts in mental health care, to be nurses, to be babysitters, to be police officers sometimes. And that's not what they should be focused on. We should be focusing on these kids being the most fulfilled in their lives as they can be. So we've, as I alluded to, we've been working across the country on as many bills as possible to open up education freedom for everybody. I always say, I saw the funding numbers up there. New Hampshire, we're definitely higher. But we always get ranked as the best public schools in the country, us in Massachusetts. I grew up in the best district in New Hampshire. I hated it. It didn't work for me whatsoever. I was miserable. And thankfully, my parents had the ability to send me to a different option. So wealthy kids or well-off kids have always had school choice. It's the rest of the folks that they're saying, no, you don't get that. You should save up for private school, which most people can't afford. So just this week, I'll just highlight one. It was just this past week. North Carolina was the first state to bipartisanly pass a universal education savings account bill, which means that every parent in the state of North Carolina will be able to get that state funding directly to them, and they can choose what is the best option for their child. And that's really where we're working towards and wanting to implement across the country, because that gives freedom. It also gives accountability to bad schools. Because if you're an underperforming school, you're probably not going to have a lot of kids seeking out to go there, and it's an incentive for them to improve. So I know we have brief time, so I'll just touch on that one example. But I want to go back to Rachelle. What is our vision? What do we want from education 10, 20 years down the road? What should be our vision, our North Star that we're shooting towards?
Yeah, so we're all about vision and aiming for the highest, but what we're really looking at is what we call the 3 Ds of education. So we at AFP, and then in the broader Stand Together community, which AFP is part of, are focused on empowering every learner with the tools and resources to discover, develop, and deploy their unique talents and abilities. So whatever that looks like. It could be partially in a public school, it could be partially in a private school, it could be a micro school, it could be partially at home, but allowing families and students to completely customize their education to fit that child's specific needs.
It's a big order, but if you've been paying attention the past couple of years, COVID and the pandemic especially accelerated this, and we've been seeing a snowball effect. Florida, Iowa, all passed universal ESA bills. Oklahoma passed an incredible tax credit program. So it's been growing and growing. It's a movement that's expanding. And just because we're talking about funding issues that can be very difficult, I'm going to be honest, very difficult to pass in bluer states. But as Rachelle mentioned, there's a lot of different options that you can open up through regulatory reform and things that at least you have those options there, so that when you can tackle those funding mechanisms, you have those options set up, and there's already kids going to those schools, and they're the best advocates we have. They try to take these programs away in New Hampshire every year, and we pack the State House with thousands of kids and try to take school away from a poor kid. It's going to be a really difficult political move. So I'd like, Rachelle, if you can just touch on, since you have been working across the country on this, what do you think are the most impactful models that states have been passing, and talk about those options that I mentioned, since a lot of my states, and Delaware included, it's difficult for the funding mechanisms, but those options are definitely something that you can work on.
Yeah, definitely. So at AFP, we work in what we call 4 buckets. So the first one is Fund Every Kid, and that's a lot of what Ross has been describing tonight, and that is literally dollars following children wherever they want to go. Right. Those programs are very difficult to pass. Nine states have complete universal programs. That's 9 more states than had them in 2021, so there is hope. And then number 2 is what we call no more lines, and that is the ability to go to any public school that you wish. So Delaware is pretty good on these types of policies. It's otherwise known as open enrollment. So there's 2 types of open enrollment. There's inter-district, where you go to a different school in your district, or there's intra-district or cross-district, where you go to a different public school outside of your district. So Delaware mandates that districts allow for both inter and intra-district open enrollment. But from there it gets a little hazy because districts are not required to report the number of open seats. So a district could tell you, oh, we have no open seats, when realistically they do. So we support policies that would create greater transparency. So if you're attending one of those failing schools, but there's not a policy in place for you to get funding to go to a private school, or your family can't afford that, or you can't move, you may be able to have an alternative option. The third area we work in is what we call Education Your Way. And this is a big bucket, but it largely focuses on public school access. So public schools are, in fact, public schools. They should be accessible by anyone and everyone for whatever amount, just like public parks or other things like that. So if you are a homeschool student, but you want to take science at your public school access policies would allow you to do that. Or if you go to a public school full time, but you want to go to another public school for, say, a gifted program, it would allow the access for students to really flow in and out of the schools that work best for them. And then the fourth area we work in is Learn Everywhere. And this one's pretty self-explanatory, but we recognize that learning literally happens everywhere, but it only gets accredited in the classroom. So Learn Everywhere programs allow students to receive credit for learning that happens outside of the classroom. So say that you are a ballerina, or say that you do robotics. You can get fine arts credit, or you could get science credit, because a lot of times you learn just as much through those activities, or maybe more than you would learn sitting and reading a book in a classroom. So those are kind of the areas we work in. I hate to tell you, but we recently published a report that examines public school access, and we asked 12 different questions, and Delaware did not meet any of the marks. So there's a lot of room for improvement, even if you can't pass the big funding following kids programs. By just opening schools up and allowing kids to flow in and out as they need, or as makes sense for them, gives families a lot of flexibility.
Thanks for that, and I'll just end with this, because I always like highlighting, I think it's the greatest example of the power of education, freedom, and choice. I love the song. But if you have ever attended, and I encourage everyone to do it, but I've been to them in Boston near me, where they have charter school lotteries. If you've been to one, you know on one side of the room it is elation, it is joy, because they know that their kid is going to have this separate option, this new option that has way better outcomes and is a way better fit for their kid. On the other side of the room, the kids that didn't make it, it is one of the most depressing and sad things you can see, and that's because they know that they're stuck. They are stuck in their zip code, in their failing school, and there's no one there that's gonna help them, and you're set off on a bad foot for the rest of your life. We want to break that system. We want everybody in that room to have that choice. So that's what we're working on at AFP and AFP Foundation. So thank you so much for having us.